I would just like to congratulate my sidekick, who is also our assistant, our administrative assistant, Qing Bellamy. This is her first gallery curation, so yay, Ting! Just want to acknowledge my staff. Everything that comes out of this building that you see in the community, that you experience and enjoy, it's because it's an incredible team that makes all of this happen. And I just am so deeply grateful for the staff that we have, the culture of the staff, the passion that all of our staff brings to this organization and the community, all working together to make art part of our lives. And so I just want to personally thank them for the amazing job that they are doing. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Mike Bellamy, who will tell you all about what we're experiencing in this space this evening.
Right. Thanks, Jackie.
You're welcome.
And thank you, everybody coming, and thank you for some of my friends in China that are watching live, so that's cool, and thanks to the Arts Council for hosting us. Perhaps most important, I need to say thank you to my wife, Anita, who was indispensable because of her artistic eye, her understanding of various Chinese dialects, most importantly, her fierce negotiation skills. So without her help, this collection wouldn't be possible. We've got a lot to fit into this 15-minute window of talk, but first I would like Anita to say a few quick words. Okay? So to keep in a few quick words.
Hello， 你们好，谢谢你们过来参加我们的 show。这个 show 的幕后是我跟我老公在中花了很多的时间和精力来移民到美国，谢谢。Sorry, I just can't speak very fast in Chinese, but I could not speak very fast in English. If you want listen very fast English, let my husband Mike do talking. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to start off, I usually, when I give some talks in my business overseas, I usually start the presentation on an example of how often I mess up the Chinese culture or make a mistake with the language, but apparently I have problems in English too. Did anybody catch the mistake in the Daily News interview that I did a few days ago? I know some of you have because you picked on me, but I wanted to explain that I own a law firm in Hong Kong, but the business was stable, and in 2016 I moved the family to Perry from China. But somehow what the interview came across as Mike owed a law firm in Hong Kong. But things were stable, and he was able to leave China with it. So it's the exact opposite. I trust you, this is not stolen. There's no lawyers coming after me. Quite the opposite. So the Daily News, Batavia Daily News did a great correction and a nice article, nice video that maybe you've seen. So at the end of the day, it's all good. Maybe I should tell you what I'm not going to talk about today. So you're not going to hear me talk about U.S.-China political relations, Tibet, Taiwan, Xinjiang, my forecast for the Chinese economy or the impact on international trade. But if you do buy me a beer at the brewery next door, I will talk your ear off on all those topics. But what I would like to say is, I don't know how the governments are interacting, but what I can say about the average Chinese person is that they're a lot like the average American person, and that we care about our families, we're proud of our history, and we prefer peace and stability. So you would be surprised at how similar the Chinese are to us. In the interest of time, I'm not going to repeat what you'll find in the booklet, the handout. So Anita, Ting, and we spent probably 20 hours each pulling together the exhibit and putting together that booklet. And Ting was up until 5 a.m. last night doing details of the symbolism that you'll find in the booklet. So rather than repeat it all, take it home and read it. And it starts clockwise going around the room. So each piece is numbered, and you'll find all details about it. I thought I would start. I want to talk about the first and the last pieces that came into my collection. All right. So this is the first piece that Anita and I ever collected, and it's when we were living in China, probably, I don't know, 2000 and something or other, and I was running a factory, and I had a lot of square footage on the walls to fill up, and my Chinese competitors were trying to look modern to their American clients, so they would always shop at places like IKEA, and I thought, I don't have enough money to afford IKEA for this whole place, but there's a lot of Chinese furniture, and if I can show my customers that I have a taste for China, maybe they'll understand that we can do business together. I know how to get things done in China. I don't have to prove that I'm American. I just show up in that regard. So Anita and I were doing some backpacking and traveling out in Yunnan province in the foothills of the Himalayas, and that's where the mythical Shangri-La is, Zhongdian in Chinese. And what is it in Chinese for Shangri-La? Anyways, we were over there, and in the rush to modernize, whole towns were getting bulldozed to put in, brick and mortar high-rises. And this little neighborhood was knocked down, and stuff like this was being sold on the street for a few dollars. So I think I paid $8 for this, and I thought, well, that's cool.
Don't talk about the price.
it was a long time ago. And so we got it home, and I really didn't know what I had in my hand. So what did we do? Anita and I had like 2 of these, and we were able to fit them in the airplane home. So they fit in the where you stick your luggage. And so we got a 55-gallon drum of soapy water, and I think we sat it in there, and then I got a toothbrush, and then when it wouldn't clean up, I went at it with a wire brush. So I totally destroyed the patina, but it looked really cool, and that's really what got me going. Is I just like the looks of it, I like the history of it, that it was old. So I've never really worried about what's the value. Now I do a little bit more, but in the beginning I just was attracted to unique pieces that are really old. And then if you look at the last piece that came into my collection before we packed this up and moved it, it's the wood panel over there. So I'd like to say above these 2 chairs. So probably when America was fighting the Civil War, that was hanging in a Chinese farmer's house or a little barn, collecting dust. And if you go over there and you scratch far enough down, you'll find soil from China from that era. So I didn't touch that, I didn't clean it at all. Now I've learned my lesson, and I just bring it into the collection and dust it off a little bit, but I don't scrub it. So that one is 100% original. So what makes this collection special? First is the size of it. We probably have about 200 to 250 pieces. If you account a pair of chairs as 1 or 2, that's why it's 200 to 250. It's really how do you classify it as a set of 6 window panels, 1 or more. But anyways, that's larger than most galleries around here. It's not the type of furniture that you would find in a national level museum, but it's on par what you would find regionally, and it's unique that I have so many pieces. So I didn't set out to get a collection. I was just lucky that I had a big factory to decorate 15 years ago. Also, the other thing that's interesting about it, or what makes it special, is the location. Normally, the products that show up in America have already been manipulated somewhat. They've been refurbished because that's where the money is. I like the distressed stuff that had a lot of character. It's beat up, it's broken, but I know that it's authentic because no one was buying the beat up stuff when I was. So I have a warehouse full of distressed, old, honest furniture, and that's fairly unique in America. Also, the transparency. So when I would when Anita and I were out shopping, not shopping, but out in the neighborhood, and we found something cool, we would work with, well, let me tell you what happens. Often, the collector would go out, let's call him a picker. A picker goes out in the countryside, finds a cool but distressed chair, like the one behind Brian in the middle there. And then you would bring that to a refurbishment center where you would pay them to, in theory, fix it up, replace the broken parts with period-specific wood. But often it would get taken apart and sold. The valuable parts would be stripped behind your eyes, so you really couldn't trust anybody. You would give your antique, and it would come back looking new, but actually the expensive parts of it would be cannibalized. So the way we solved that is Anita and I worked with a Chinese family, and we became their biggest customer and just said, hey, we're going to give you pieces that'll keep the 4 of you busy. Just be honest with us. So The reason I'm telling that story is because we had total transparency. We were living in China, we would see this family on a weekly basis, and I cataloged everything. So when we found a part, where did we find this chair? What wood is it? What was the name of the owner? What street did they live on originally? And then when pieces were fixed, if there was a broken part and we replaced it, what wood was used to replace it? How much was replaced? What finishing material took place? So for this piece, I might have 200 high-resolution pictures, and then in 20 years from now, long after I've forgotten about what the history of this piece is, I can go back to it. So I was methodical in getting that transparency. Also, what is interesting about this collection is the period in which I was actively collecting. At the time that I started collecting with pieces like this, I wasn't much of a collector, obviously. I took a wire brush to an antique. But I did have a lot of wall space to fill up on my factory, so I focused on the big pieces. And entire walls, I would collect beams. There's that large courtyard, the black door. That thing weighs 400 pounds at least. I know, I've moved it around. So no one else was kind of collecting that stuff at the time. Keep in mind that back then, we're talking 20 years ago, China was modernizing so quick. People from the countryside were basically just closing the door on their courtyard homes in the countryside, moving to a small apartment in the city where the jobs were, where the money was. Everybody wanted to be modern, right? So they weren't taking their old chairs with them, let alone a courtyard door that weighs 400 pounds to a tiny apartment. It'd be like if everyone from Perry suddenly moved to Manhattan, we wouldn't be taking our barnwood with us, you could say. And at that time, the Chinese that did have an interest in Qing Dynasty art and furniture, they were buying small, intricate pieces. So it was a very low, it was a good, there wasn't much demand and there was plenty of supply. And I was lucky enough that I owned a factory, so I had employees, I had a warehouse, I had trucks. So Anita and I would get in a van, we should have a TV show, Chinese Pickers, and we would drive for 2 days into the countryside. One time I drove halfway to Israel and the border with Kazakhstan. It took a month, and we would just get into small towns where places were being demolished, and we would go in there with our van, the two of us, spend the night in some hotel, and then I would call in the truck, and the 18-wheeler, well, it wasn't an 18-wheeler, but it was like a big U-Haul truck from my factory would come in, my employees, and pack up entire homes and ship it back. So I have one wall that's almost half of this size of this wall that came right off a house being knocked over. I'm like, I like the windows, like the door. How much for the wall? So I've got some unique pieces that, because of not necessarily their value, their historic value, but just their sheer size and weight is very unique to see in America outside of museums. Things have changed so much in 20 years. I like to mention that China has raised 300 million people out of poverty since they opened up. So nowadays there's a strong middle class. There's more billionaires in China than there are in the US. Per capita we have more, but in terms of sheer number, they have 1.3 billion people. So there are more billionaires. The market has changed so much. Now big pieces are hot. The bigger the better when you own a mansion, right? And you're proud to be Chinese and you're 2,000 years of history. So I got out right before the market made a U-turn and the prices went up. So early on, I started selling some of this stuff just to see what it was worth. And some of my best customers were Chinese people that would prefer to buy from an American in America and have it shipped back to China for two reasons: the prestige of bringing your cultural relic back to China, but more importantly, if a Chinese person says to another Chinese person, "This is Middle Qing furniture, 100% authentic," if they're lying, no repercussions. If I say that in America there are repercussions in our legal system. So it's safer for some Chinese people to buy from an American in Perry than from another Chinese person in China or Hong Kong. So that's what makes it special from the outside, but what makes it special to me? it's really the beauty of it, interesting, and especially the age. When I was an exchange student in Japan, I stayed with a family, and they had an 800-year-old samurai sword that had been polished every month for 800 years by their family. Like, I got to hold it, I'm like, that's so cool. You know, our country wasn't even around then. So this kind of the feeling of how age is intermingled with modern society really caught my attention. So when maybe a piece, like this is an architectural piece, some joinery that we would find up in the beam of a temple or a wealthy home, and at the time, you know, okay, that's just a block of wood that someone would want to carve up and make a chair because the chair was more valuable to sell at the wholesale market. But I saw this and I'm like, hey, that's more than 100 years old. Someone carved that back in the day. Yeah, I want that. So don't throw that out. Don't cut it apart. And I would haggle over it, or Anita would haggle over it, and we get it for a good price and throw it on the truck. So I've got lots of pieces like that. So I didn't really focus on trends or try to pick the products that the items that would be a good resale. I just things that looked cool and were unique, and it happens to be my taste was the exact opposite of what the market wanted locally back then. And a lot of the stuff I use in our house, like when we came in today, my daughter was sitting on the chairs and playing with stuff. Like, no, for today it's on display. We can't sit in it. But you know, some of the things I just love. Hey, this was, you know, maybe from before America had our American Revolution. Yet we're using it on our dinner table, and I figured if it survived the Cultural Revolution and getting shipped halfway across the world, it's not going to fall apart if we watch a little television and sitting on this stuff. So I picked things that were robust and could be used, and they're not museum pieces. They have character and blemishes, but that's what makes it special. Now, to wrap up my time, I'd like to go back to where it all started, and I know some Rotarians are watching now and some are here, so I wanted to thank the Perry Rotary Club. Why? Well, because when I was a college student so long ago, they sponsored me to go to Asia as an exchange student. So 2 semesters turned into 24 years. And I can't say enough good things about the Perry Rotary Club. You know, they're the people that are behind the Village Beach, the Splash Park, and so much more. Yesterday, or on Thursday, the library needed new shelves. Where did they go? You know, Jessica came over to the Perry Rotary and asked for some money to put in new shelves. 2 weeks ago, when the New York State grant for the trails and beach ran out of money, Perry Rotary stepped in and pledged $5,000 for a kayak ramp on the outlet and docks at the beach. But COVID was hard on Perry Rotary, and no annual Rotary show, no selling coffee and popcorn at the Letchworth Craft Fair because it was closed. So those events would generate close to $100,000 for Rotary, which Rotary would pump back into the community. So are there any Rotarians in the room? I know we've got a couple. So know that Rotary now is selling raffle tickets. So $20 for 3, contact a Rotarian, and that's how we're going to make up the difference for these trade shows. I'm sorry, for these shows we didn't do. They've got things like a $3,000 furnace from Harding's. I mean, it's not like small stuff. It's like $1,000 furnaces. There's a night at Silver Lock and Glam Ground in Tiny House Village. Great. I don't know who the people are behind that. Well, nice place. Riding lawnmower, car detailing from McClurg's, dinner at the Glen Iris. Anyways, keep the Rotarians in mind. And buy a ticket and help support Rotary, because at the end of the day, without Rotary, I wouldn't be here, and maybe would not have met my wife and had kids. So I think for me, it all goes back to Rotary. Well, I promised Jackie that I wouldn't sell any furniture, but I didn't say anything about selling tickets, so we'll call it even. On that note, I thank you for coming. I hope I got close to my 15 minutes, and I welcome any questions that you may have, and please. You know, do read over the pamphlet. There's so much that I couldn't cover today, but the pamphlet does a good job of giving the details. So thank you again for coming.
Thank
you. Is Jackie's okay to take questions?
Absolutely.
All right.
Will these eventually be on a permanent display someplace?
So the question was, what happens next? Will there be a display? And yes, there are some distressed buildings on South Main Street that I recently acquired, and with the help of a grant that was applied for and administered by the Village of Perry, we're going to put in a private art gallery. something very similar to this, but maybe on a larger scale. And also, my barn is filled up with antiques. I need a place to stick my boats and snowmobiles and cars, so I gotta get this stuff out. We found a home on South Main Street. Probably COVID has slowed it down. We're behind schedule. I thought we'd be open for this year, but by next year, we'll have a gallery kitty corner from here.
Oh, nice.
Megan, yes.
Tell us a great story about one of your piece findings. Like, what was one of your best stories?
Okay, so I'm also a bit of a World War II history buff, and remember how the Flying Tigers would come over from Burma over the Himalayas, and they would land in an area called Kunming to help support the war against the Japanese and support the local peasants and nationalist Chinese who were trying to fight. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind. And I was traveling around that area, and I was like, oh, this is where the Flying Tigers, were active. And I was kind of reading a story about it. Then a week later, I was walking down the street. She didn't set me up. I didn't ask her to ask this question. But thank you for asking, because it's one of my favorites. And Anita and I weren't. You remember this, Anita? We weren't really looking for anything. We were walking down this. Basically going between farms in the countryside to get to like a hiking path, and I saw a piece of furniture, and it had English "Good Morning 1940" something on it, in English, right? So it's very strange to find a piece of older Chinese furniture with handwritten English on it. And so it was two chairs that are military style folding chairs, and they were like held together with wire. And the Chinese farmer was kind of sitting there having a cigarette, and one was like putting the cigarette out on the chair. And I said, "Hey, would you sell those to me for the equivalent of $20?" He's like, "Here." And so then I called them Smithsonian and did a little research, and it might have been a gift from one of the Chinese nationalist translators to not the Flying Tigers because of the date, but the team that I forget what they were called after the Flying Tigers when it became militarized rather than volunteers. So it has history, and it was just laying there for the taking. So that's one of my favorite stories, and maybe next time we do an exhibit, I can bring that one along. Thanks. Do you want to talk about some of the symbolism? And any of these? Tell us about what the dragon represents. What happens when you see a dragon in Phoenix? Because you see that a lot in Chinese restaurants, let alone Chinese furniture. So,
Dragon?
The dragon in Phoenix.
So dragon traditionally represent emperor, and a long time dragon is the yang, how do you call it?
In American, yin and yang.
It's the yin and represent power, authority, wealth. What else?
What does the yang represent? So
Yang
the
is-
phoenix is
Yin is
male and female.
Yeah, the balance of when you look at yin and yang, well, yin and yang, you guys probably know it's the balance of energy between female and male, and
So what happens when you see just a dragon with no phoenix?
that usually represent wealth, power, or sense of protection. Normally, wealthy people or noble people will have dragons in their house.
So you often, like when you go into an older historic home, it's like the dragon is over the top, but then when you get into the inside, it's about harmony. So often the dragon's on the outside, projecting to the world, and then harmony on the inside. Trying to, got to keep the wife happy with the phoenix.
You should mention about the bats, the very typical.
Okay, go ahead.
No, you,
Which one?
the bats.
Oh, bats. Okay, so what's the bat in Chinese?
Yeah.
Yanfu. So there's a lot of people who see these and like, what animal is that? Because it looks kind of like a moth or a bird, but there's bats everywhere on the furniture if you look closely. And the bat is for bringing it's what do you call it when two words have the same the different meaning but the same sound? Homophone, that's right. So this bat also can sound like
Fu. Yeah. Fu, which is happiness in Chinese. Yanfu.
Yep. And the other another thing to remember with dragons is that like in Ming and early Qing Dynasty, dragons were fierce and powerful. And then, as emperors change and tastes change, dragons become more esoteric and cartoonish. So like this little foo dog / dragon dog it looks like a cartoon. And this, you could look at this for an hour. I know, I looked at it for years before I realized that there was a cartoon dragon in there. Can you see the dragon?
Yeah.
So his 2 eyes and the beard. So that's very, very abstract dragon. So over time, even how a dragon looks and how is it carved, but we're talking hundreds of years over time. It wasn't like over a week, but over centuries. Also, one piece that I'd like to point out, if you look at that, so a lot of people think they see swastikas, right? Very sharp 90-degree patterns, and that's a symbol long before Hitler, and it goes in the opposite. So I always remember a swastika is sharp and digging into Poland, whereas a Chinese swastika is going the opposite way, so it's not a swastika, it's a symbol for 10,000, which means like eternity and longevity. So some people, they go to China and they see what looks like a swastika, think, what's that all about? It has nothing to do with, it's hundreds and hundreds of years long before Germany. I don't know if there's any from Buddhism representing 10,000 or eternity. All right.
What about the woods? Are they all the same kind of wood?
No, so like some of the really fancy pieces might not even have Chinese wood. They might be from middle or early Qing, when there was enough wealth to go to Thailand and Indonesia and get really expensive wood and bring it back to China for processing. So sometimes the wood in Chinese piece isn't even Chinese. A lot of elm, but these pieces here are from all over the country, so different species.
So you're saying you don't know your woods?
Not exactly, no, I can't look at that. I could take a guess, it's softer wood, but I might be wrong. So I'm not going to go on record to the Perry Herald. Okay, all right, thank you again, everybody. And one more question, please.
Talk about fakes. Is there a fake piece in this?
Yeah, so there's, anybody want to point to the piece that's fake? So there's one, yeah, you guys got it. If you could lift it up, you would feel that it's much lighter. The one in the corner, it's really shiny, but if you notice, it even has the fake patina, fake wear marks. Yeah. So that is totally modern wood, just it looks older. But if you picked it up and shaped it, you'd realize, please don't, but you'd realize that it's quite different. So there's nothing wrong with that, because the person wasn't trying to trick me when I bought it. I knew what it was, and it was priced accordingly. Told you. So it's only dangerous when you go on eBay and someone's trying to sell you a 300-year-old antique. In reality, it's like 10% of it is authentic and 90% is new wood refurbished, attached to that one leg of a chair. There's a lot of that. And keep in mind that China has now, there's an export ban that's been in effect and is getting even tighter. So before the ban, you could find stuff that maybe someone went over to China as a tourist and they saw 10 chairs and they bought them and had them shipped back. That stuff doesn't happen now. So most of the pieces there's even more replicas. There's Qing style, Ming style. Don't be confused with that. That's actually Qing era from that period piece. All right. Okay. Thanks again, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And I'm going to actually piggyback off Mike's example. In your program, you may notice that there is an opportunity for you, if you are not a member of the Arts Council, and if we have in any way this evening piqued your interest or speak to you about some of the quality work that we and opportunities and experiences that we bring here to Wyoming County, we hope that you will give consideration to supporting us as an arts organization. There is in the program an opportunity is how you can become a member at different levels, very, very affordable. There's also a little bit of information about one of our upcoming fundraisers. We also, like the Rotary, we are experiencing very, very deep. I don't know if we've endured, but we had a significant shortfall last year for revenue, and we are hoping that we can at least prevent 50% of that revenue loss this year. So any support that you are able to lend to us by way of financial support would be deeply appreciated. Thank you so much again for sharing tonight with us, and we hope that you will share the knowledge that you gained this evening with friends and family and invite them to come and see this amazing show. Thank you so much, Mike.